I'm Mitch Silver, and I graduated in 1971 from Shadle Park. I am the owner of Silver Collector Car Auctions. Had a few other events getting up to this point, but I've been doing that for 33 years. I started the company from just an idea and have been making a living at it for some time. Have operations all over Western United States, operated in Canada. I think I've operated in 17 different states and multiple cities, and it's been a really good career. Well, I started at Stadium School, right down by Joe Albi Stadium is where it was located. It's not there any longer. I left in 3rd grade and went to Balboa School, and then junior high was at Salk, and high school was at Shadle. Kent Jones came out of Minneapolis, and he was the journalism teacher and drove a Corvette. Maybe there's some connection there with the old cars that I do, but he was somebody that was just sort of a little bit younger, a new teacher, and enthusiastic, and just had a great approach to teaching. And I got involved in journalism and the yearbook, and that ties in with where I took my, finish up my college degrees, because they were in speech communication, journalism. I tried to get the most out of the high school experience in some respects. I did a variety of things. So I tried drama. I wasn't particularly good at it, but I was in one play, and it was nice to know how that part of the world worked. I was involved in sports a little bit. I was on the swim team. I wasn't very good at that either. Apparently, I found a number of subjects that I wasn't all that great at, but I met the people, and I stayed involved in those things throughout that time period. I was actually very active in Boy Scouts during that same time, and was lodge chief for the Order of the Arrow for the whole Inland Empire area. And so that was another interest during that high school era. And that put me meeting people from all of the other schools in the area, in the whole regions, and did some national things in association with that as well. Just did, a journalism camp that we went to, and some fairly major names in radio, television around Spokane were people that went to that same camp, and we've literally remained friends for what's coming on close to 40 years now. And so some very subtle things like that really can have a much longer range impact than you would have ever imagined at the time that you were involved in them. I started with Evergreen State College. It had just opened. I was in the absolute first class when I graduated in '71. In the fall of that year was the first group of people to go to Evergreen. So I was in a creative, kind of a new school approach to doing education, very avant-garde, liberal arts, heavy liberal arts emphasis, and met some fantastic people that I continue to share and do things with on a very regular basis. I was only there for about 2 years, went to school for about a year and a half, and then I came back to Spokane and went to work, got married, and then a few years later went to Eastern and finished up my baccalaureate degree at Eastern. Started working as a teaching assistant and went through my master's at Eastern, and then I stayed at Eastern and worked for 11 years at the university. I did some doctorate level coursework down at WSU, but didn't complete a doctorate. My children went to the Apple program at Garfield School, and I was very active in that. So I've, over those years, met a number of newer faculty, but obviously very important to me because they were the ones teaching my children. In addition to the collector car auction company that I started and run and continue to run, I was a glazer for a number of years. My dad was a glazer, so I was out working, replacing windows and doing all that stuff. That's kind of what got me going back to college and finishing my degree, and went a different direction after I came out of that with teaching at the university. I taught at Eastern and I was director of the Center for Extended Learning. So we handled a lot of the returning adult students coming back to class, portfolio where you take your life experiences and document those in order to get some elective credit towards completing a baccalaureate. Created a baccalaureate degree for firefighters that we delivered via satellite. It was the first baccalaureate via satellite done in the nation, and that was one of the things I was involved in, a very exciting thing out at Eastern. And then the auction company got bigger and took more and more of my time, and so I needed to make a choice between staying with the university or going into private business, and I went with private business. And I knew I would miss the teaching aspect of that, but I really haven't looked back much. It's been very active and very exciting to create a business and expand it. And that's what I've done. In addition to those things, I had a vintage wine business operated in Spokane and did that. I had a lake resort out on Silver Lake, no relation, but ran a lake resort, took it back to looking like the lake resorts of the 50s and 60s, and camping and grass lakeside, and that was really fun. And then I purchased the Met Theater from Metropolitan Mortgage, and we've since renamed it the Bing Crosby Theater downtown, right adjacent to the Davenport Hotel. And I owned that for 8 years, and just recently sold that to another business owner in that district, and they have some. Want to take it forward and do some more work to it, and I want to get back into some other projects myself. I guess I'm kind of a nostalgic or a purist in that respect, and so I'm more likely to look at something and rather than go modern with it, put it back to what I remember it should have looked like in my life. So, and I guess I do that with the nostalgic cars that I sell, and even in the wine business, I was a person who was cellaring wine and selling it after it had matured for 10 years or so and tasted a little better. So I see people struggling or wondering where they're going to go with their lives and what they're going to do career-wise, and I think maybe you really struggle with that when you're in college and you've been going for a few years, and a lot of times you have classroom experience but you don't actually get out into the field or get into that job. I think internships help that if you have an opportunity to try out the work, but the fits and the matches that are just exciting when you see them is when somebody takes their hobby or their interest, because usually your interest would tend to become your hobby, and puts that together with a job. I kind of fell in love with old cars at some point in my life, and when I went to an antique car auction that was taking place in Seattle, I looked at that and said, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I looked at every aspect of what they were doing to auction antique cars and said, I have those skills, or I'm close enough that I can polish them and learn them. And I took my field of study and put it into a hobby, and have been doing that now for 33 years. I have several other hobbies and interests, and one of those is this sounds strange, but I'm trying to visit every country in the world and every autonomous region, because it's hard to define a country in some respects. And I've been pretty successful. I've been to 126 different countries so far, and I'm still going. There's about 240 countries and autonomous regions out there, so I'm a little over halfway. And I make a real serious effort to visit these places, and some of them are fairly obscure, but it really keeps me up in learning about the world and paying attention to what's going on. And when I watch a news broadcast or read a story about something happening, there's a good chance I've been there and stood right in those spots. And for example, Syria is heavily in the news right now. I bicycled by myself from Beirut over to Damascus, Syria, and down into Jordan. So where all of their little adventures are going on right now, I've bicycled right through the middle of those on a solo trip. I enjoy that. So am I still doing things? Absolutely. I intend to do more and more of that. I keep a boat in the San Juan Islands, and I love going out boating and adventuring and seeing that part of the world. I'm studying now and practicing and kind of getting ready. I'd like to get a sailboat and do a little world adventuring on that. And there's a fair amount of learning on that. I definitely consider myself a lifelong learner. And if there isn't a learning, I'm not one to sit in a cruise ship and let somebody else take me on an adventure. I go out and create my own adventure. I've looked at what people do in that kind of stuff, and I can do that for myself and do that for you know, anybody that's traveling along with me. So it's, you know, I like reading about, studying about Bangladesh, and then going there and learning about it and seeing it firsthand and being in that environment. So that's one of the major things I'm going to do. Plus, you know, we live in an incredible part of the world up here. It is so nice to be able to do winter sports, whether it's skiing, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, incredible lakes to get out to. You know, I kayak, I canoe, I raft, you know, I powerboat, and you've got so many different places around here where you can do that. I'm still a backpacker. I love backpacking and getting into the mountains. But like most people, when you have your job and your career and your family, you don't get to devote as much time as you'd like to those pursuits. And if you have a whole bunch of them like I do, you really kind of limit that down a little bit. So I'm hoping to maybe get my business a little bit on cruise control and enjoy some aspects of that. I've always enjoyed them. I think I'd like to pursue them a little more diligently.